The Atlantic swallowed Dr. Hollis Crane on April 15, 2025. 6 months later, it gave him back, changed, scarred, and carrying secrets carved into his flesh. On that April morning, Crane had been 47 miles southeast of Bermuda, where the ocean floor drops away into the Puerto Rico Trench. The water was gin clear, visibility perfect at 60 feet. He was collecting tissue samples from deep water coral formations for the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, routine work for a marine biologist who'd logged over 3,000 dives in his career. His research vessel, the Cousteau, was found 12 hours later, engines running, dive flags still flying. Crane's surface gear was stowed properly in the equipment bay. His logbook showed a planned 40-minute dive, maximum depth 80 feet. The dive computer on the boat's console indicated he'd descended at 9:47 a.m. and never surfaced. The Coast Guard search lasted 8 days. They covered 400 square miles with helicopters, cutters, and dive teams. They found nothing. No body, no emergency buoy, no equipment scattered by currents. Dr. Hollis Crane had simply vanished in water that wasn't deep enough to hide a body, in conditions too calm to explain an accident. His memorial service was held on a Thursday in May. His sister Marlena spoke about his obsession with the ocean's mysteries, how he'd always said the sea kept its secrets better than any government. She didn't know how prophetic that would prove to be. 24 weeks after Hollis Crane disappeared, a jogger named Trent Wilkins found a man stumbling through the dunes of Cape Hatteras National Seashore. It was 6:23 a.m. on October 8th, the sun just breaking the horizon, painting the sand pink and gold. Wilkins was running his usual morning route when he saw the figure emerge from the surf line, naked, disoriented, moving like someone who'd forgotten how legs worked. "Hey!" Wilkins called, slowing to a stop. "You okay, man?" The man turned. His face was weathered, sun-darkened, but his eyes were the color of deep water and completely lost. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "I don't..." His voice was hoarse, unused. "Where am I?" Wilkins pulled out his phone, already dialing 911. The man wasn't drunk or high. His confusion was deeper than that, more fundamental. Like someone waking from a dream they couldn't remember into a world they didn't recognize. "You're at Cape Hatteras," Wilkins said gently, "North Carolina. What's your name?" The man blinked slowly, processing each word as if it were in a foreign language. Then something flickered in his eyes, recognition maybe, or just the muscle memory of identity. "Hollis," he said. "Hollis Crane. FBI. Special Agent Ramona Voss got the call at her field office in Norfolk at 11:30 a.m. A presumed drowning victim from 6 months ago had walked out of the Atlantic Ocean with no memory and no explanation. The Coast Guard was interested. The Navy was interested. And since Crane had disappeared in waters where 3 other researchers had vanished over the past decade, the Bureau was very interested. Voss had been with the FBI for 11 years, specializing in cases that existed in the gray areas between federal jurisdictions, missing persons in international waters, suspected human trafficking with maritime elements, the weird cases that didn't fit standard categories. She'd learned to approach strange situations with methodical skepticism, but Hollis Crane's reappearance troubled her in ways she couldn't yet articulate. She found him at Outer Banks Hospital, sedated but stable in a private room. Through the observation window, she studied the man who'd supposedly spent 6 months dead in the Atlantic. His skin was deeply tanned, not pale like a corpse, or even someone who'd been imprisoned indoors. His hair was longer, salt-bleached, almost white. He looked healthy. Better than healthy, actually. He looked like someone who'd spent half a year in perfect physical conditioning. Dr. Sarah Hendricks, the attending physician, met Voss in the hallway with a clipboard full of test results and confusion. "I've been practicing emergency medicine for 15 years, Hendricks said without preamble. "I've never seen anything like this. His vital signs are perfect. Blood work is cleaner than mine. Hydration levels suggest he was drinking fresh water regularly until very recently, maybe 12 hours ago." "Signs of captivity?" Voss asked. That's where it gets strange. No ligature marks, no evidence of restraints, no signs of abuse or malnutrition. If anything, he's in better shape than when he disappeared. I have his medical records from Woods Hole. He's gained 15 pounds of muscle mass. Voss made a note. The scarring? Hendrix's expression darkened. I've never seen anything like it. They're not random. Someone carved very specific symbols into his rib cage and shoulder blades. The healing suggests they were made over time, some fresh, some weeks old. Whoever did it had medical knowledge. The cuts are precise, deep enough to scar permanently, but not deep enough to cause serious damage. Self-inflicted? Anatomically impossible, the locations, the angles, he couldn't have done this to himself. And Agent Voss? Hendrix lowered her voice. The symbols aren't random scratches. They're deliberate, patterned. They look almost like coordinates or a map. When Voss entered Crane's room, he was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring out the window at the ocean. His back was to her and she could see the marks Hendrix had described. Geometric lines and curves carved into his skin like a maritime tattoo done with a knife instead of needles. Dr. Crane? He turned and she was struck by his eyes, alert, intelligent, but with an unsettling emptiness behind them, like a house with no one home. Agent Voss, FBI. She showed her badge, moved slowly to avoid startling him. I'd like to ask you some questions about your disappearance. Crane nodded. I've been trying to remember. I can't. His voice had regained some strength, but there was something wrong with his speech patterns, a slight delay, as if he were translating his thoughts from another language. What's the last thing you remember clearly? Diving. He closed his eyes, concentrating. The research site. Coral formations at 78 feet. The water was warm, clear. I was collecting samples from a brain coral cluster. He opened his eyes, frustrated. Then nothing, until I woke up on the beach this morning. No dreams, flashes of memory, even fragments? Crane was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes I smell something, antiseptic, but not hospital antiseptic, something chemical, oceanic, and I hear a woman's voice speaking in a language I don't recognize, but the words feel familiar, like I should understand them. Voss pulled out her phone. Open the voice recorder app. Would you mind if I record this for accuracy? Crane shrugged. I don't have much to tell you. Let's start with basics. Do you remember your research? What you were working on when you disappeared? Deep water coral adaptation. Climate change effects on reef systems below the thermal layer. Crane's voice became more confident as he moved into familiar territory. I was part of a multi-institutional study funded by NOAA and the Navy Research Office. Navy involvement? They provide funding for oceanographic research, standard arrangement. Crane paused, his brow furrowing. Although, what? There was something unusual about this particular dive series. The coordinates were very specific, not just general reef areas, but exact GPS locations. Usually we have flexibility in site selection based on conditions. This time we didn't. Voss made notes. Who provided the coordinates? Dr. Marcus Delacroix, the project supervisor, from the Navy Research Laboratory. Crane rubbed his temples. We weren't supposed to deviate from the specified locations. He was very clear about that. Have you been in contact with Dr. Delacroix since your return? I don't even remember returning. Agent Voss, I lost 6 months of my life. I don't know where I was, who I was with, what happened to me. I have scars on my body that I didn't put there, and when I close my eyes, I see things that feel like memories but can't be real. What kind of things? Crane was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Lights underwater, not sunlight. Artificial lights, very bright, in places where there shouldn't be any structures, and people in diving gear but not normal scuba equipment, something more advanced. They were gesturing, communicating without speaking. He looked up at Voss, and I could understand them. Somehow I knew what they were saying without hearing words. Can you describe these people? Faces are unclear. The dreams, or whatever they are fragmented, but they moved like they belonged underwater, completely comfortable, like they'd been diving their entire lives. He touched the scars on his ribs unconsciously. One of them did this to me, a woman, I think. She was marking me like I was important somehow. Voss closed her notebook. Dr. Crane, I'm going to be direct with you. Your disappearance occurred in an area where several other researchers have gone missing over the past decade. Your reappearance raises questions that we need to answer, both for your safety and for national security reasons. National security? The symbols carved into your body. Our analysts believe they contain encoded information, possibly coordinates, possibly communications protocols. Someone went to considerable effort to mark you very specifically, then release you. We need to understand why. Crane looked down at his hands. You think I'm some kind of messenger? Carrying information I don't remember receiving? I think someone kept you alive and healthy for 6 months, then sent you back with a message carved into your skin. The question is who and what they're trying to tell us. 3 floors below, in the hospital's basement radiology department, Dr. Elizabeth Chen was examining the digital X-rays and MRI scans of Hollis Crane with growing bewilderment. As the head of diagnostic imaging, she'd seen thousands of scans, but Crane's results defied every category she knew. His bone density was 15% higher than normal. Not pathological, but enhanced, like someone who'd been living under increased gravitational pressure. His lung capacity was significantly expanded, with structural changes that suggested adaptation to prolonged breath holding. Most disturbing were the metallic microparticles distributed throughout his tissue, too small and dispersed to show up on casual examination, but clearly visible under high-resolution imaging. Chen picked up her phone and dialed the FBI agent's direct line. Agent Voss, it's Dr. Chen from Radiology. You need to see these scans immediately. Your Mr. Crane has been modified. 2 hours later, Voss was studying the scans alongside Chen and Dr. Hendricks in a conference room that smelled of disinfectant and coffee. The images on the wall-mounted monitors looked more like engineering schematics than medical diagnostics. The metallic particles are distributed along his nervous system, Chen explained, using a laser pointer to highlight specific areas. They're concentrated around the brainstem, the spine, and the major nerve clusters. I've never seen anything like it. Could it be environmental contamination? Voss asked. Exposure to industrial pollutants? Not with this distribution pattern. These particles were introduced deliberately, probably through injection over an extended period. They're biocompatible. His immune system isn't rejecting them, which suggests they were designed specifically for human integration. Doctor. Hendricks leaned forward. There's something else. His blood chemistry shows trace elements that don't occur naturally in the human body. Rare earth metals, deep-sea minerals, compounds that exist only at extreme oceanic depths. How extreme? Deeper than any human could survive. Even with the most advanced diving equipment, we're talking about pressures that would crush a submarine. Hendricks pulled up another screen. But here's the impossible part. His physiology shows adaptation to those pressures. His cardiovascular system, his skeletal structure, even his cellular composition has been modified to function at depths that should be instantly lethal. Voss studied the scans, feeling pieces of a puzzle clicking into place, a puzzle she didn't want to complete. Could this be done surgically? Some kind of experimental biomedical procedure? Agent Voss, Chen said quietly, what you're suggesting would require technology that's decades ahead of anything publicly available. We're talking about cellular-level engineering, neurological interface systems, physiological enhancement that borders on... She trailed off. On what? On science fiction. Voss's phone buzzed with a text message from her field office. Crane's dive computer recovered from hospital personal effects. Data analysis complete. You need to see this immediately. She stood up, gathering her files. Doctors, I need you to keep Mr. Crane under observation. Medical supervision only. No discharge, no visitors without my authorization. And I want a complete analysis of those metallic particles. If someone turned Dr. Crane into a human submarine, I need to know how and I need to know why. The FBI field office in Norfolk occupied 3 floors of a glass building overlooking the Elizabeth River. Agent Voss found her tech specialist, Danny Reeves, in the cybercrimes unit, surrounded by monitors displaying diving data that looked more like abstract art than scientific measurements. "Tell me you found something useful," Voss said, pulling up a chair. Reeves looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Agent Voss, this dive computer is a piece of work. It's been professionally wiped, not just deleted, but scrubbed with military-grade data destruction protocols. Whoever did this knew what they were doing." But they missed something. "The computer has redundant memory systems, and I found fragments in the backup cache." He pulled up a data visualization that looked like a 3-dimensional map. "These are depth and pressure readings from Crane's last dive, or what should have been his last dive." Voss studied the display. "I'm not seeing the problem. Look at the depth progression." Reeves highlighted specific data points. Crane descends to 80 feet, normal for his research. But then the readings continue. 90 feet, 100, 150, 200. He turned to face her. "Agent Voss, according to this computer, Hollis Crane descended to over 800 feet on a single breath of air. That's impossible. It gets worse. The pressure readings don't match the depth. At 800 feet, water pressure should be over 25 atmospheres. These readings show normal atmospheric pressure, like he was diving in air instead of water." Voss felt a chill. "What else?" "GPS coordinates." Reeves brought up another screen. The computer tracked horizontal movement during the dive. Crane didn't just go down, he went down and then traveled over 12 miles underwater in a straight line to a location that officially doesn't exist. "What do you mean doesn't exist?" "I ran the coordinates through every database I could access. No, Navy charts, Coast Guard records, commercial shipping lanes. According to every official source, there's nothing at that location except ocean floor, but..." Reeves hesitated. "But what, Danny?" "I found references in classified military archives. Project Deepwater, Cold War era, a Navy research program studying underwater habitats and human adaptation to extreme environments. The program was shut down in 1987, all records sealed, but the coordinates match." Voss stood up, pacing to the window. Outside, the Elizabeth River flowed toward the Chesapeake Bay, carrying commercial traffic and Navy vessels toward the open ocean. Somewhere out there, in water too deep for human survival, something had taken Hollis Crane and returned him transformed. "Danny, I need you to dig deeper into Project Deepwater. Use whatever clearances you need, and I want a complete analysis of those symbols carved into Crane's body." "Already working on it. The symbols are definitely coordinates, GPS locations scattered across the Atlantic. But there are other elements, pictographic components that don't match any known writing system. I've sent copies to the Navy's Cryptographic Division and the NSA's Linguistics Department." "How long for results?" "Could be days, could be weeks. These symbols are unlike anything in the databases." Voss's phone rang. Dr. Hendricks' number appeared on the display. "Agent Voss, you need to get back to the hospital immediately. Dr. Crane he's doing something we can't explain." "What kind of something?" "He's holding his breath, voluntarily, for the past 47 minutes. Voss ran. She found Hollis Crane in the hospital's swimming pool, a small therapeutic facility in the rehabilitation wing. He was floating motionless at the bottom of the 8-foot deep end, eyes closed, completely relaxed. Dr. Hendricks and 2 nurses stood poolside, monitoring equipment that tracked his vital signs. "How long has he been down there?" Voss asked. 51 minutes, Hendricks replied, checking her watch. "His heart rate is 40 beats per minute. Oxygen saturation should be dropping dramatically, but it's holding steady at 98%. "That's impossible." "Agent Voss, everything about this case is impossible. Dr. Crane asked to use the pool for exercise. We thought he meant swimming laps. Instead, he dove to the bottom and hasn't moved since." As they watched, Crane opened his eyes underwater and looked directly at them. Without apparent effort, he pushed off from the bottom and surfaced in one fluid motion, breathing normally. "How do you feel?" Hendricks asked immediately, checking his pulse. "Good," Crane said, treading water effortlessly. "Better than I have since I woke up." The pressure feels familiar. Dr. Crane, Voss said, you were underwater for almost an hour on a single breath. That should be physiologically impossible. Crane looked at her with those deep water eyes. I know, but it doesn't feel strange. It feels like remembering something I'd forgotten. He climbed out of the pool, water streaming from his altered physiology. The scars on his back and ribs were clearly visible, geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow in the swimming pool's reflected light. I'm starting to remember more, Crane said quietly. Fragments, but clearer now. The underwater facility, it's real. People living and working at depths that should crush them. And Agent Voss? He looked at her with an expression that was part fear, part anticipation. I think they're expecting me to come back. That night, Agent Voss couldn't sleep. She stood in her Norfolk apartment looking out at the Chesapeake Bay, replaying the impossible things she'd witnessed. A man who could hold his breath for an hour, scars that looked like navigation charts carved into human skin, technology decades ahead of anything she'd seen in classified briefings. At 3:17 a.m., her secure phone rang. Agent Voss, this is Admiral Catherine Reeves, Naval Intelligence. We need to talk. Immediately. 20 minutes later, Voss was escorted through the security checkpoint at Naval Station Norfolk, past buildings she'd never seen despite 11 years of federal service. Admiral Reeves met her in a conference room 3 levels underground, surrounded by electromagnetic shielding and soundproofing that suggested conversations here never officially happened. Agent Voss, what I'm about to tell you is classified at levels that don't have names. Dr. Hollis Crane's reappearance has activated protocols that have been dormant for 38 years. Reeves opened a file folder marked with classification stamps Voss didn't recognize. Inside were photographs of underwater structures, vast geometric complexes that looked more architectural than natural. Project Deepwater was officially terminated in 1987, Reeves continued. Unofficially, it never ended. We've been monitoring deep ocean installations operated by entities that don't appear on any government organizational chart. Entities? Human, as far as we can determine. But humans who've adapted to environments that should be uninhabitable. They've been down there for decades, possibly longer, developing technology that makes our most advanced systems look primitive. Voss studied the photographs. The structures were massive. Cities, really. Built on the abyssal plain at depths where sunlight never penetrated. Why haven't we made contact? Established diplomatic relations? We tried. In 1986, we sent a delegation, 6 Navy divers using experimental atmospheric suits. Only one came back. He'd been modified, physiologically altered to survive at depth without mechanical life support. The changes were irreversible. Like Dr. Crane. Exactly like Dr. Crane, the returning diver carried a message carved into his skin, coordinates for future contact. But when we arrived at the designated locations, there was nothing. They'd moved, gone deeper, disappeared into trenches that our submarines couldn't follow. Admiral Reeves pulled out another photograph, a man in his 50s with the same deep water eyes Voss had seen in Hollis Crane's face. Commander James Walsh, the only survivor from the 1986 contact mission. He lived for 3 years after his return, helping us understand the modifications that had been made to his physiology. Then he walked into the Atlantic one morning and never came back. You think he returned to them? We think they called him back. The modifications they make, they're not just physical. There's a psychological component, a compulsion to return to the depths. Agent Voss, we believe Dr. Crane is experiencing the same pull. Voss felt pieces clicking together. The symbols on his body, they're not just coordinates, they're a summons. Our cryptographic analysis suggests you're correct. Dr. Crane has been programmed, for lack of a better term, to return to specific locations at specific times. The question is whether we try to stop him or follow him. Follow him? Admiral Reeves leaned forward. Agent Voss, these deep ocean entities possess technology that could revolutionize human civilization. Medical advances, environmental adaptation, energy systems we can barely comprehend, but they're isolationist, hostile to surface contact. Dr. Crane might be our only opportunity for peaceful communication. Or he might be walking into a trap. That's a risk we're prepared to take. The next morning, Voss returned to Outer Banks Hospital to find Hollis Crane's room empty. The bed was neatly made, his hospital gown folded on the chair, but Dr. Crane had vanished as quietly as he'd appeared. Doctor. Hendricks met her in the hallway, agitated and embarrassed. We had him under observation every 15 minutes. At 4 a.m., he was sleeping normally. At 4:15, the room was empty. No alarms triggered, no security footage of him leaving. He just disappeared. The windows? Third floor, locked from the inside. The only exit is through the monitored corridor. Voss called her field office immediately. I need satellite imagery of the North Carolina coast from 4 a.m. this morning. Focus on beach areas within a 20-mile radius of Cape Hatteras. The images came back within an hour. At 4:23 a.m., thermal satellites had detected a human figure walking across the dunes toward the ocean. The figure entered the water and disappeared beneath the surface. No rescue attempts were detected, no distress signals. The person had simply walked into the Atlantic and vanished. Danny, Voss called her tech specialist, I need you to track something for me. Take the coordinates from Crane's dive computer, the deep water location from his original disappearance, cross-reference with current ocean conditions, tidal patterns, anything that might indicate increased activity. Already on it, Reeves replied. And Agent Voss, I found something interesting in those symbols. They're not random coordinates, they form a pattern, a convergence point approximately 60 miles southeast of Cape Hatteras. And according to seismographic data, there's been unusual deep water activity in that area for the past 72 hours. What kind of activity? Low-frequency sonar pulses. Too organized to be natural. Too deep to be from surface vessels. Something big is moving down there. Voss made her decision. Contact Admiral Reeves. Tell her we're going to follow Dr. Crane. The Navy research vessel Meridian left Norfolk Naval Base at 0800 hours on October 11th. Officially, it was conducting routine oceanographic surveys. Unofficially, it carried enough advanced diving and communication equipment to establish first contact with a previously unknown civilization. Agent Voss stood on the bridge as they approached the convergence coordinates, watching sonar displays that showed impossible structures rising from the abyssal plain. The ocean floor at this location should have been empty sediment and scattered debris. Instead, the readings indicated geometric formations that stretched for miles, artificial constructions built at depths where human technology couldn't function. Sonar contact, announced Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, the ship's operations officer. Multiple objects ascending from depth, large, moving in formation. On the surface displays, Voss could see them. Dark shapes rising through 2 miles of water with impossible speed and grace. Submarines, but unlike any design in human naval archives. They moved like living creatures, undulating through the water column with organic fluidity. They're surfacing, Chen reported. The first craft breached the surface 50 meters off the starboard bow. It was beautiful and alien, a fusion of biological curves and technological precision that seemed grown rather than built. Hatches opened along its upper hull, and figures emerged. They looked human at first glance, but the differences became apparent as they moved. Their skin had a subtle blue-green tinge, like deep water adaptation. Their eyes were larger than normal, adapted for light conditions that barely existed, and they moved with the same underwater grace that Voss had observed in Hollis Crane. One of them raised a hand in what appeared to be a greeting gesture. Agent Voss, Admiral Reeves said quietly, you're about to make history, or start a war. A communication channel crackled to life on the ship's radio system. The voice that spoke was unmistakably human, but carried the same linguistic delay that Voss had noticed in Crane's speech. Surface Vessel Meridian, this is Deep Station Coordinator Elena Vasquez. We request permission to establish diplomatic contact. Voss picked up the radio handset with hands that barely trembled. Deep Station Coordinator, this is FBI Special Agent Ramona Voss. Permission granted. We're here about Dr. Hollis Crane. Dr. Crane is safe and will be returned to your custody after debriefing. We have information that your government requires, information that cannot be transmitted through normal channels. What kind of information? A pause. Then, Agent Voss, your species is facing environmental challenges that threaten its survival. Climate change, ocean acidification, resource depletion. We've been monitoring surface conditions for decades, waiting for the appropriate moment to offer assistance. What kind of assistance? Adaptation technologies. Medical procedures that allow human survival in altered environments, sustainable energy systems that function in deep ocean conditions. Agent Voss, we are not aliens. We are human beings who chose a different evolutionary path, and we believe it's time for our two civilizations to reunite. 3 hours later, Voss found herself in the most surreal, diplomatic meeting of her career. The Meridian's conference room had been modified with water-filled breathing apparatus for the deep-sea delegates, while Admiral Reeves and her staff sat at a table that was half submerged, half in air. Coordinator Vasquez was a woman in her 60s who spoke with the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of lives. Her second-in-command introduced himself as Dr. Marcus Delacroix, the same name from Hollis Crane's research project. Dr. Delacroix, Admiral Reeves said, you've been monitoring our surface research activities. For decades, we've been selecting candidates for adaptation, researchers whose work and psychological profiles suggest they could serve as ambassadors between our civilizations. Dr. Crane was ideal. Marine biologist, experienced diver, no immediate family members who would complicate his disappearance. You kidnapped him. We recruited him. The process requires 6 months of physiological modification and cultural integration. Dr. Crane volunteered for the program once he understood what we were offering. Voss leaned forward. What exactly are you offering? Coordinator Vasquez gestured to an aide, who opened a sealed container. Inside were samples that looked like living coral but pulsed with bioluminescent energy. Symbiotic organisms that allow human survival at any ocean depth. Medical technology that can reverse aging, cure genetic diseases, repair catastrophic injuries, energy systems that convert deep ocean thermal vents into power sources that could supply your entire civilization. In exchange for what? Integration. Your surface government ceased deep ocean military activities. Commercial fishing in international waters transitions to sustainable aquaculture, managed jointly by surface and deep-sea populations, and selected individuals undergo adaptation to serve as permanent liaisons between our communities. Admiral Reeves made notes. How many individuals? Initially, 50 per year. Eventually, as many as choose the deep-sea life. Agent Voss, within 2 generations, the distinction between surface and depth populations could disappear entirely. Humanity could become a truly amphibious species. And if we refuse, Coordinator Vasquez's expression darkened, then you continue on your current path toward environmental collapse while we retreat deeper into the trenches. We've survived in isolation for 40 years. We can survive for 40 more, but your civilization cannot. The door to the conference room opened, and Hollis Crane walked in. He looked different, more confident, more purposeful. The scars on his body had healed into distinct geometric patterns that seemed to glow with subtle phosphorescence. His eyes held depths that Voss recognized from photographs of the deepest ocean trenches. "Agent Voss," Crane said, his voice carrying new harmonics, like sonar frequencies at the edge of human hearing. "I remember everything now. The facility, the adaptation process, the community they've built down there. It's remarkable. Dr. Crane, are you here voluntarily?" "More voluntarily than I've ever been anywhere. They've shown me things, coral cities that filter toxins from the water, medical bays that can regenerate lost limbs, children who can dive to depths that would crush surface submarines. Agent Voss, they're not asking us to become them. They're offering to help us become better versions of ourselves." Voss studied his face, looking for signs of coercion or programming. What she saw was genuine enthusiasm tempered by scientific objectivity. "What happens now?" she asked. Coordinator Vasquez stood, water cascading from her modified breathing apparatus. "Now you return to your governments with our proposal. You have 6 months to provide an answer. During that time, Dr. Crane will serve as our official ambassador to the surface world. He'll live among you, but he'll remain in communication with us. And if our answer is no, then Dr. Crane returns to the depths, and you won't see us again. Not until your civilization is ready to accept that the ocean is not empty space to be exploited, but a living system that requires partnership rather than dominance. She moved toward the exit, her delegation following. At the threshold, she turned back. Agent Voss, Admiral Reeves, your species stands at an evolutionary crossroads. You can continue fighting the planet's changing conditions, or you can adapt to them. We've chosen adaptation. The ocean welcomed us. It could welcome you too. 3 months later, Agent Voss sat in a classified briefing room in Washington, D.C., watching Dr. Hollis Crane address a joint committee of scientists, military officials, and intelligence analysts. He'd been living on the surface since the maritime contact, serving as a bridge between human civilization and the deep sea communities. The adaptation process had continued slowly. His ability to hold his breath now extended to over 2 hours. His vision had enhanced to function in near-total darkness, and the bioluminescent patterns in his scars had become more pronounced, but he remained recognizably human, recognizably himself. The choice we're facing, Crane was saying, isn't between staying human or becoming something else. It's between evolving or declining. The deep sea communities have maintained human consciousness, human values, human relationships. They've simply expanded the definition of human capability. General Patricia Walsh, Joint Chiefs Representative, leaned forward. Dr. Crane, what assurances do we have that this isn't an elaborate invasion strategy? General, they've had the technology to overwhelm surface civilization for decades. If conquest was their goal, they would have acted already. Instead, they've remained hidden, studying our problems, developing solutions. They're offering us partnership because they need the diversity and creativity that surface populations provide. And the cost? Crane touched the patterns on his ribs unconsciously. Change, adaptation, the willingness to accept that our current path leads to environmental collapse and species decline. General, they're not asking us to abandon the surface. They're asking us to expand into the depths. Senator Margaret Chen, committee chair, shuffled her papers. Dr. Crane, what's your personal recommendation? Crane was quiet for a long moment, his deep water eyes reflecting the conference room's fluorescent lighting. Senator, 6 months ago, I was a marine biologist studying coral reef decline. I watched species disappear, ecosystems collapse, and felt helpless to stop it. Today, I've seen coral cities that actually improve ocean health. I've met children who can breathe underwater as easily as breathing air. I've witnessed technology that could solve our energy crisis and medical advances that could eliminate genetic diseases. He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the Potomac River. I've also felt the psychological pull toward the depths that Admiral Reeves described. Part of me wants to return to the deep sea facility immediately. But a larger part of me wants to build bridges between our worlds. The adaptation isn't a loss of humanity, it's an expansion of human possibility. The committee voted 7-2 to recommend limited cooperation with the deep sea communities. Dr. Hollis Crane returned to the ocean on a Tuesday in February, walking into the surf at Cape Hatteras as Agent Voss and a small team of observers watched from the dunes. He carried no equipment, wore no diving gear. The modifications to his physiology had progressed to the point where he needed neither. 50 meters from shore, he turned back and waved, a gesture that was both goodbye and invitation. Then he dove beneath the surface and disappeared into depths that had once been impossible for human survival. 3 days later, the first surface volunteers arrived at the deep sea facility for adaptation procedures. Within a year, permanent communication links were established between Washington and the abyssal cities. Within 5 years, the distinction between surface and depth populations began to blur as humanity started its slow expansion into Earth's final frontier. Agent Voss never underwent the adaptation herself, but she often stood on the beaches of North Carolina, watching bioluminescent signals flash in the deep water and knowing that human civilization had found a way forward that none of them had imagined. The ocean had kept its secrets for millennia. Now, finally, it was sharing them. In the depths off Cape Hatteras, where the continental shelf drops away into the Puerto Rico Trench, cities of living coral pulse with gentle light. Children swim through gardens of bioengineered kelp that clean toxins from the water. Scientists in laboratories that exist at crushing depths develop technologies that could heal a wounded planet. And somewhere in those depths, Dr. Hollis Crane continues his research, no longer studying how marine life adapts to changing oceans, but helping humanity itself become part of that adaptation. The scars on his body have healed into something beautiful. Navigation charts that map not just ocean coordinates, but the path toward a future where the boundaries between land and sea, surface and depth, human and marine, have dissolved into something entirely new. The Atlantic took him once and gave him back transformed. This time it kept him, not as a victim, but as a volunteer in humanity's greatest evolutionary leap. The depths are no longer empty, they're home.